The Celestial Council chamber shook as the last Guardian battleship exploded in the space beyond its crystalline windows. High Guardian Zethmorin, last of the Praetorian line, stumbled as the blast wave hit the station. Blood from 3 different species stained his ceremonial armor. "Impossible," he gasped, watching as the Nexus dreadnoughts moved into formation around the sacred station. "Our defenses were perfect. Our strategies flawless. For 12,000 years, the Guardians of Celestial Balance had maintained peace across the universe. This ancient coalition of 12 advanced species, each selected for unique strengths, had ended the Great Chaos War and established the longest period of interstellar harmony in known history. Their technologies were centuries beyond any rival. Their diplomatic network spanned 17 galaxies. They were, by any measure, invincible. Until today. On a distant observation post, Ambassador Chloral of the Vraxians, candidates who had spent 3 centuries proving themselves worthy of Guardian status, watched in horror as quantum torpedo fire reduced the Andromeda Sentinel fleet to atoms. The Guardians' perfect formations and calculated responses crumbled before the Nexus Empire's seemingly primitive but devastating battle tactics. "They're not following any known strategic doctrine," whispered Choral's tactical advisor. "It's as if they're guessing what the Guardians will do next." The brutal conquest lasted 8 days. One by one, Guardian homeworlds fell, their populations given a simple choice: kneel or perish. Most chose to kneel. Those who resisted were made examples of. When only the Central Council remained, the Emperor of Nexus himself appeared on all communication channels. His face remained hidden behind a mask of shifting metals, but his voice carried the weight of absolute power. The Guardians claimed to protect the universe through perfection. He announced as the last council members were brought before him in chains. "But perfect systems are perfectly predictable. Your flawless logic made you blind to chaos. Your precision made you fragile." He lifted High Guardian Zethmorin's head by the hair. "The era of these so-called protectors is permanently over. Let all worlds hear, there is no salvation in perfection." As Guardian worlds burned and refugees scattered, the Vraxian diplomatic corps made a desperate decision. Their sensors had detected a unique energy signature from a previously overlooked world, a blue planet in an unremarkable spiral galaxy. The Guardians had designated it developmental observation only centuries ago, then largely forgotten it. Earth, a primitive world whose inhabitants still fought with chemical projectiles and had barely touched their own moon. But the Vraxian deep scans showed something anomalous in the human neural patterns, something the Guardians, in their pursuit of perfection, might have misunderstood or dismissed. As the Nexus Empire consolidated its power, a single Vraxian ship slipped away, damaged but operational, carrying the last hope of resistance to a world that had no idea it was already part of a cosmic war. "There it is again," Dr. Eliza Chen muttered, adjusting her headphones. 3 nights straight, the same signal had appeared precisely at 3:17 a.m. at the SETI outpost in Chile's Atacama Desert. Not random cosmic noise, but structured, with mathematical patterns that made her hands shake as she recorded them. By morning, her inbox exploded with messages from observatories worldwide reporting the same anomaly. The pattern was moving, and it was heading directly toward Earth. "It's accelerating," she told the hastily assembled panel of experts. "Whatever it is, it's making course corrections. This is not a natural phenomenon." Governments mobilized quietly. Military satellites reoriented. For 72 tense hours, humanity waited. In the Australian outback, Jake Cooper was fixing fences on his cattle ranch when the sky split open. A wounded ship, trailing plasma and debris, screamed overhead so low it flattened the grass. The impact shook the ground for miles. Jake, an ex-Navy pilot who'd sought the outback's isolation after 3 combat tours, grabbed his first aid kit and raced toward the rising smoke column. His military training told him to wait for authorities. His human instinct wouldn't let him leave someone. anyone, to die in the wreckage. What he found changed everything. The alien, Ambassador Chloral, was bleeding turquoise fluid from 3 wounds. The universal translator around its neck sparked and fizzed. Jake, working methodically, sealed the wounds with his veterinary stapler and applied pressure bandages. Need, safety. The translator sputtered. Coming, death. Your world, danger. When military helicopters appeared 2 hours later, they found Jake and the ambassador playing a makeshift game using stones to communicate mathematical concepts. Sorrel had manually recalibrated the translator by observing Jake's speech patterns, something the Vraxian language specialists had claimed would take days with any new species. This human, Sorrel announced as armed soldiers surrounded them. I speak only through this one. Jake found himself abruptly promoted from rancher to humanity's first interstellar diplomat, all because he'd stopped to help instead of running away. In the briefing room, surrounded by generals and scientists, Sorrel's damaged ship projected a holographic recording of the Guardian massacre. Why come to us? Demanded the U.S. Secretary of Defense. We're centuries behind your technology. Sorrel's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a Vraxian expression of deep consideration. The Guardians collected data on thousands of emerging species. Yours was peculiar. You adapt faster than any cataloged species. You bond through adversity rather than being broken by it. And you display a trait the Guardians found distasteful. You embrace emotional decision-making as a strength. Dr. Chen, studying the Vraxian neural scans, made a startling discovery. They're frightened of us, she whispered to Jake. Not because we're dangerous, but because we're unpredictable. They can't calculate what we'll do next. Deep in Nexus territory, an intelligence officer interrupted the Emperor's War Council. The Vraxian diplomatic vessel we damaged has been located. It reached the prohibited zone, the world called Earth. The Emperor's mask shifted, forming a new pattern. Earth, that primitive backwater. Then he paused, accessing ancient Guardian records. What he found made his voice grow cold. Recall the Third Fleet from the Andromeda campaign. I want this Earth and its inhabitants eradicated down to the microbes. No prisoners, no study, complete sterilization. Is the threat so great, Emperor? No, he replied, studying the Guardian notes on human psychology. But it could be, and I do not tolerate potential. The emergency United Nations session erupted into chaos when the Vraxian holograms displayed the fall of the Guardian worlds. Earth's combined military might wouldn't equal a single Guardian defense platform, and the Guardians have been annihilated in days. This is a deception, the Russian delegate shouted. They seek to manipulate us into surrendering our resources. Ambassador Chloral remained eerily still as accusations flew. Finally, when the chamber quieted, the alien activated a secured data crystal, the last intact record from the Guardian archives. Before their fall, the Guardians maintained observation posts near 3,000 developing worlds. Sorrel explained, Earth was classified as anomalous development pattern. Monitor with caution. Your species was considered problematic. The hologram showed Guardian scientists puzzling over human history. Unlike other species that developed along predictable technological and social pathways, humans made bizarre leaps, stubbornly clung to outdated ideas, while simultaneously pioneering radical new ones. And most troubling to Guardian sensibilities, regularly allowed emotions to override logical choices. The Guardians debated direct intervention on your world 73 times. Sorrel continued. Each time, they decided your unpredictability made you too dangerous to approach. You were quarantined, not overlooked. And that may have saved you. In a secured laboratory beneath Geneva, Dr. Chen made a discovery that changed everything. The Vraxian neural interface technology, designed for their logical, sequential thought patterns, produced unexpected results when synced with human brains. It's overloading, her assistant warned as the system sparked. No, Chen whispered, watching the data stream. It's expanding. The technology is adapting to our neural architecture instead of the other way around. That should be impossible. When she presented her findings to the Emergency Council, she didn't mince words. The Vraxian technology doesn't just interface with our brains, it's amplified by them. Our capacity for intuitive leaps, emotional processing, and creative problem-solving creates feedback loops their systems were never designed to handle. The potential applications are extraordinary. Nations remain divided. Some saw opportunity, others extinction. Into this deadlock stepped Jake Cooper, still wearing his dusty rancher's clothes despite his new diplomatic status. "I spent 3 days with Ambassador Xorel," he said, addressing the world leaders. "Know what I figured out? They're terrified. Not just of the Nexus, but of us. They got technology that makes ours look like stone tools, but they're here begging for our help. Why? Because we've got something they don't, something that scares the hell out of them." He walked to the central hologram and pulled up images of Earth's history. Humans surviving ice ages with sticks and stones, rebuilding after global wars, landing on the moon with computers less powerful than a modern calculator. We keep surviving things that should kill us. We keep fighting when the logical choice is surrender. The Guardians were perfect and predictable, and that's why they're dead. We're messy, emotional, and stubborn as hell. And that might be exactly what the universe needs right now. Later, in a secure chamber, Xorel revealed the final piece. The Vraxian High Council sent 15 ships to 15 different worlds seeking potential allies. Ours is the only ship that wasn't immediately destroyed by the Nexus. Why? Because they considered Earth too primitive to bother monitoring closely. We have perhaps 8 weeks before they realize their mistake. "And then what?" asked the Secretary General. "Then they will not send a fleet," Xorel replied solemnly. "They will send a planet killer. The Nexus Emperor tolerates no potential threats, no matter how remote. 8 weeks to prepare for an enemy that destroyed the most advanced civilization in the universe," Jake summarized. "Sounds like a fair fight to me." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Then, one by one, the world leaders began to nod. Humanity had faced impossible odds before. It was, after all, our specialty. Subject 17 is flatlining. "Shut it down," Dr. Chen shouted as the volunteer convulsed, neural interface smoking at the temples. Another failure. The 17th in 3 days. Earth had weeks, not months, before the Nexus arrived. In underground facilities across the globe, Vraxian technicians worked alongside human scientists to adapt their combat technology. The synapse armor, 2 human neural patterns. But the results were catastrophic. "The human mind is too chaotic," the Vraxian chief engineer explained. "The armor expects logical command sequences. Your brains provide storms." In frustration, Dr. Chen authorized a radical approach. Instead of forcing humans to adapt to the armor's logic, they would redesign the armor to embrace human chaos. "We've been looking at this backward," she told the exhausted research team. "The armor doesn't need logical pilots. It needs dreamers. It needs people whose minds create possibilities that shouldn't exist." The call went out globally, not just for soldiers and scientists, but for artists, emergency first responders, disaster survivors, and anyone who had faced impossible situations and found ways through. The testing criteria shifted from measuring orderly thought to evaluating creative problem-solving and emotional resilience. In Rio de Janeiro, a street artist who had escaped cartel violence by painting hidden messages in public murals passed with flying colors. In Nairobi, a trauma nurse who had saved dozens during a hospital collapse showed perfect compatibility. In Bangkok, a retired kickboxer who had become a child rescue worker synced instantly with the system. Patterns emerge. The perfect candidates weren't those with the most disciplined minds, but those who had faced chaos and danced with it rather than trying to impose order. Jake Cooper's compatibility test became legendary. When placed in the virtual combat simulator facing overwhelming odds, He didn't follow any known tactical doctrine. Instead, he laughed, improvised weapons from the environment, and developed strategies so bizarre, the Vraxian combat AI crashed trying to predict his next move. "That's not supposed to be possible," whispered Thorol, watching the replay. Training facilities activated on 6 continents. 217 humans, the Defenders, from 68 countries began mastering the Senev's armor. The suits, black and silver with neural filaments that glowed with the emotional state of the wearer, responded to thought and amplified physical capabilities 100-fold. But their true power emerged when human emotion entered the equation. During a training exercise, a defender named Sofia Santos witnessed a simulated civilian casualty that reminded her of her lost daughter. Her grief-fueled rage caused her armor to manifest capabilities the Vraxians had never documented. Energy discharges that bypassed all known shielding. It's responding to emotional states the Vraxians can't experience, Dr. Chen explained to military officials. Their technology, filtered through human consciousness, is evolving beyond its original design parameters. The Nexus Empire, tracking Earth's communications, found the human resistance efforts amusing. The Emperor himself broadcast across Earth's networks, his metal mask flowing like liquid as he spoke. "Your primitives play with technology you cannot comprehend, stolen from failed protectors who fell before us like wheat. The Guardians, with their millennium of experience and superior evolution, lasted mere days against our might. What hope have creatures who have barely left their own atmosphere?" Jake Cooper, now field commander of the Defenders, recorded a simple response. "The difference between us and the Guardians. They never learned how to lose. We've been doing it our whole history, and we're still here. Come and find out why." Commander Vexterin of the Nexus Vanguard fleet had conquered 17 worlds. His tactical record was flawless. The operation on Earth would follow the standard protocol for primitive worlds. Destroy one major population center as demonstration, then accept immediate surrender from the surviving governments. His target, Sydney, Australia, chosen specifically to break the morale of the human called Jake Cooper. As Nexus warships breached Earth's atmosphere, their sensors detected nothing but panicked evacuations and primitive radio transmissions. Military satellites attempted to engage but were swatted away like insects. The commander smiled behind his junior officer's mask, a scaled-down version of the Emperor's. "Record everything," he ordered. The Emperor wishes to study the human response to hopeless odds. It amuses him. The first wave of dropships deployed ground forces around Sydney Harbor. Nexus shock troops advanced in perfect formation, quantum rifles ready. Their sensors showed scattered human military units retreating to defensive positions, exactly as predicted. Then their sensors began to fail. "Atmospheric interference," the commander demanded. "Negative, sir. It's as if the targeting parameters are being deliberately corrupted." From the waters of the harbor, from concealed positions in buildings, from beneath the very ground, they emerged, 50 defenders in midnight blue synapse armor, their neural filaments glowing with colors no Vraxian engineer had ever documented. Not the calculated blue-white of logical determination, but reds of rage, purples of grief, and colors that had no name in any Nexus language. Jake Cooper's voice crackled across all Nexus communication channels. "Welcome to Earth. We thought we'd save you the trouble of hunting us down." What followed defied all tactical analysis programs. The Defenders moved without pattern, each fighting with unique, improvised styles that made targeting impossible. A former ballerina-turned-defender danced between plasma bursts, her movements so fluid that the Nexus adaptive targeting system crashed trying to predict her next position. A trauma surgeon defender somehow understood the Nexus troop biology at a glance, targeting nerve clusters the Nexus had classified as military secrets. Most disturbing was the street artist from Rio. She had modified her armor to project pigments that hardened instantly. As she fought, she painted, not just for camouflage, but creating optical illusions that confused Nexus depth perception and actual physical barriers that shouldn't have been possible with the technology. Commander Vexturin, watching his perfect formations disintegrate, made the decision that would change the war. Rather than bombarding from orbit, the logical choice, he ordered his command ship to land. He would face these primitives himself. "Sir," his second protested, "standard protocol has failed," he interrupted. "We need new data. The Emperor must know what we face." As his ship touched down near the Sydney Opera House, he was met not by a formal military response, but by a single figure, Jake Cooper, whose armor pulsed with a calm blue light that the Nexus threat assessment classified as deceptive. "Your soldiers are falling," Vexturin announced through his translator. "Your cities are undefended. Surrender now, and your species may be permitted to exist in servitude." Jake removed his helmet, showing his face, a psychological tactic the Nexus commander noted with interest. "You know what your mistake was?" Jake asked conversationally. "You targeted my home. Should have picked anywhere else. Now it's personal." Dr. Chen didn't sleep for 3 days after Sydney. The captured Nexus technology was a treasure trove, not because it was advanced, but because it revealed an astonishing weakness. "It's beautiful in its way," she explained to the Emergency War Council, her eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. "Their entire military doctrine, their weapons, their ships, it's all built on complex prediction algorithms. They defeated the Guardians by perfectly calculating their responses based on 12,000 years of recorded strategic doctrine." She brought up holographic models of Nexus ships' internal systems. But look at what happens when they encounter human tactics. The simulation showed Nexus targeting systems trying to predict the street artist defender's movements. The system attempted millions of calculations per second, crashed, rebooted, crashed again, all while the human continued fighting based on nothing but instinct and creativity. "Their systems literally cannot process our illogical actions," she concluded. "The computational strain causes cascade failures throughout their network. The longer they fight us, the more their systems deteriorate." Jake Cooper, fresh from debriefing the Sydney defenders, cut to the chase. "So we're saying the more insane our tactics, the better they work against these guys. That's the most human advantage I've ever heard of." A plan formed. Audacious, borderline suicidal, and completely unpredictable. While Earth prepared its defenses for the coming Nexus Armada, a strike team would take the fight directly to the enemy. Not to defeat them conventionally. That was impossible, but to introduce a virus of chaos into their perfect systems. "We'll need to board the Nexus command ship," Jake explained to the stunned council. "Not to blow it up, but to broadcast human thought patterns directly into their network. Think of it as a logic bomb, but it's actually an illogic bomb. The casualties will be total," Ambassador Coral warned. "No one will return from such a mission." Every defender volunteered immediately. From the 217 defenders, 12 were selected, not for combat prowess, but for the uniqueness of their neural patterns. A quantum physicist who wrote surrealist poetry, a kindergarten teacher who had survived 3 war zones as a refugee, the street artist whose impossible creations had helped turn the tide at Sydney, a chef who had synesthesia that linked flavors to music, a blind mountaineer who saw through touch and sound. Each represented a different way of processing reality, ways the Nexus prediction algorithms would find impossible to categorize. As they prepared the captured and modified Vraxian ship, Ambassador Xoril approached Jake privately. "I must confess something, Commander Cooper. The Vraxian Council didn't choose Earth randomly when fleeing the Nexus. We came specifically because of Guardian research identifying human neural architecture as problematic." "Problematic how?" "The Guardians classified humans as potentially destructive to the cosmic order, not because you might conquer other worlds, but because your thought patterns themselves are contagious. Your art, your stories, your music, they change how other species think after exposure. The Guardians feared this more than any weapon." As the strike team prepared to depart, Dr. Chen uploaded the final component of their plan, the chaotic seed package. Into it went fragments of Shakespeare and Sun Tzu, Wu-Tang Clan lyrics, Salvador Dali paintings, quantum physics equations, nursery rhymes, and recordings of children's laughter and human grief. "This isn't just data," she told them. "It's humanity distilled. Everything that makes no logical sense but still works. Everything that can't be predicted but still matters. It's the chaos that the Nexus Empire has been trying to eradicate from the universe." The modified Vraxian ship slipped through the Nexus fleet's outer perimeter with insulting ease. Just as Dr. Chen had predicted, the Nexus commanders were so confident in their superiority that they barely scanned the approaching vessel. "They think we're bringing tribute," Jake told his team as they breached the security cordon. "The Emperor wants to make an example of us." The strike team of 12 defenders wore their Synapse armor beneath civilian clothes, another unpredictable choice. The Nexus security protocols were designed to detect weapons and explosives, not the neural interfaces that had been reconfigured to appear dormant. "Remember," Jake said as their ship was guided into a massive docking bay within the Nexus command vessel, "our objective isn't to win a conventional battle. It's to spread chaos." When the docking clamps engaged, the Nexus Reception Committee was waiting, 20 elite guards in ceremonial formation, expecting to escort surrendering primitives to their emperor. What happened next would be studied in Nexus military academies for generations. Instead of surrendering, each defender activated their armor in a different way. The quantum physicist began reciting nonsensical equations that somehow interfered with the Nexus communication grid. The chef with synesthesia hummed a melody that caused nearby Nexus soldiers to experience disorienting sensory hallucinations. The street artist from Rio painted impossible geometries in the air that Nexus targeting systems couldn't process. "They're not following any protocol," a Nexus commander shouted as his perfect formation disintegrated into chaos. "There's no pattern to their attack." That was precisely the point. As alarms blared through the massive vessel, the strike team fought their way deeper, leaving confusion rather than destruction in their wake. They weren't trying to defeat the Nexus forces, they were trying to confound them. The blind mountaineer defender navigated the ship's internal structure by touch and sound, finding pathways the Nexus engineers had considered irrelevant. The kindergarten teacher evaded capture by telling children stories that somehow corrupted the Nexus translation systems, making her words appear as system commands. In the Emperor's sanctum, alerts cascaded across monitoring screens. For the first time in recorded history, the unflappable ruler showed signs of agitation. "How are 12 primitives bypassing our most sophisticated security?" he demanded. His chief strategist, a being who had calculated the fall of the Guardians down to the minute, could only offer, "They're not behaving according to any known tactical doctrine, Emperor. It's as if they're making decisions at random." Meanwhile, Dr. Chen and her team on Earth activated the second phase of the operation. Using the Vraxian communication array, they began broadcasting directly into the Nexus network, not attacking it, but flooding it with human creativity, art, music, jokes, dreams, poetry, grief, love, rage, the full spectrum of human emotional experience. On the command ship, Jake and his team fought their way to the central processing hub, not to destroy it, but to connect to it. The Nexus guards, expecting them to target weapon systems or the bridge, had left it relatively undefended. "This is it," Jake said as they reached the pulsing crystalline structure at the heart of the ship. "Time to show them what humans are really made of." The defenders connected their neural interfaces directly to the Nexus mainframe, allowing their unfiltered consciousness to flow into the perfect, logical system. It was like pouring chaos into order, emotion into logic, humanity into machinery. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the Nexus fleet, systems began to malfunction. Ships lost formation. Weapons misfired. Communication networks filled with fragments of human songs, laughter, and dreams. In his sanctum, the Emperor watched in growing horror as his perfect empire began to think, unpredictably. The Emperor of Nexus stood motionless as his perfect realm crumbled around him. For the first time in thousands of years, his mask of shifting metal settled into a fixed expression: shock. Throughout the command ship, Nexus soldiers found themselves experiencing something their species had engineered out of their genetic makeup centuries ago: doubt. The primitive humans' chaotic thought patterns had infected the network that linked all Nexus consciousness, introducing concepts the Empire had declared heresy: uncertainty, empathy, wonder. In the central processing hub, Jake Cooper and his team held their positions, their neural interfaces glowing with colors no Vraxian had ever documented as their unfiltered consciousness poured into the Nexus systems. "They're not fighting back anymore," the street artist whispered, watching Nexus soldiers dropping their weapons, removing their helmets, some even sitting down in apparent contemplation. "That's because they're thinking for themselves for the first time," Jake replied. "Maybe ever." The Emperor finally broke from his trance, striding purposefully into the hub. His guards made no move to stop the defenders. They were too busy experiencing human poetry transmitted through their neural links. "You," the Emperor's voice was no longer the confident monotone of absolute authority. "What have you done to my empire?" Jake Cooper, his synapse armor damaged but functional, stepped forward. "We didn't destroy anything. We just shared ourselves. Our messy, illogical, emotional selves." The Emperor's mask rippled, attempting to form expressions it had never needed before. "The Guardians were right to fear you. Your thought patterns are contagious. That's what makes us human," Jake said. "We change. We adapt. We influence each other. We're not perfect, and we don't want to be." As they spoke, Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication array. "Jake, it's working. Nexus fleets throughout the galaxy are standing down. Some are even broadcasting. Music? I think they're trying to create art." For the first time in recorded history, the Emperor removed his mask. Beneath it was not a monster, but a face marked with ancient scars, the face of a being who had once been vulnerable and had spent millennia ensuring he would never be vulnerable again. "We destroyed the Guardians because their perfection made them predictable," he said, his voice suddenly younger, uncertain. "But you humans, you are chaos incarnate. You should have been easy to destroy. Instead, you've become the first species to ever defeat the Nexus." "We didn't come to defeat you," Jake replied. "We came to remind you what it means to be alive." In the weeks that followed, the universe transformed. The Nexus Empire didn't collapse. It evolved. Ships that had come to conquer Earth now arrived carrying diplomats, artists, and scholars. The rigid hierarchy dissolved as Nexus citizens rediscovered concepts buried in their ancient history: creativity, individual thought, emotion. On Earth, Ambassador Xoril addressed the United Nations. The Guardians feared human unpredictability because they understood its power. They knew what we now know, that your species doesn't just adapt to the universe, you transform it. Your thoughts change those who encounter them. The 12 defenders who had been prepared to sacrifice everything had instead initiated a cosmic renaissance. Worlds that had cowered under Nexus domination now experienced something new: freedom to evolve on their own terms. Jake Cooper, offered leadership in the new Interstellar Council, declined. "I'm just a rancher who got lucky," he said. "But Earth is full of people like me, ordinary humans who do extraordinary things when pushed. That's our superpower." As Earth took its place among the stars, humanity brought with it the lesson that had saved the universe from perfect, sterile order. There is strength in imperfection, wisdom in emotion, and power in unpredictability. The universe would never be the same again, and that was precisely the point.